everybody. Thank you very much, Eric. Ulrich, sorry, German, to invite us. Thank you very much, Massimo, to introduce before me. My contribution will be totally practical, not theoretical as the other one. I will speak about a small example of garden, which was recently restored in Roma, which is part of multicultural context, and I will speak about problematic that they appear. I am an anthropologist. This is a research that I'm doing, so it's a research in theory, in Italian way. So it's not concluded, absolutely. So it's the first step, which is good for our analysis and to speak about the problems. I think you will be interested because it's a landscape project, so it will be interesting to know how that's happening in this context. So the garden of, I will read, and I try to be short. The garden of Piazza Vittorio occupies a central place in the topography of the city of Rome. No, that's it. So this is the city, and it's located in the Esquilino district, one of the most multi-ethnic in the city, given its proximity to Termini station. So I choose a Google map in order to see where the place is located. So as you see immediately, it's in the middle of the most important museum. We have the Basilica of Santa Maria Maggiore and St. John the Lateran, the Basilica of San Clemente, the Colosseum. This is the garden, this is the Termini station. And historically a transit area for all internal and international migration with a strong presence of groups of Asian origin, mostly Chinese and Bangladeshi, and less meaningful measure from Romania, the Philippines, and Africa sub-Saharan. Its construction began. This is the shorter image of the garden, which looks more as it is actually. This is the garden. So its construction began in 1887 after the unification of Italy with the aim of embellishing the new porticoed square with a public garden. That is a formally organized space of nature and highlighting the archaeological find preserved there. The old garden, remembered by the inhabitants of the district, was inspired by the picturesque taste of the English garden, with a series of paths connecting the ruins of an ancient monumental nymphaeum known as Mario Trophies, and from which a waterfall formed a pond, and with the Porta Magica of the ancient Villa Palombara, covered with roses and honeysuckle. In the center was an open space for concert, as well as many exotic and rare species of a small train for children. In the early 20th century until 1995, it housed the stalls of the local market, first on the pavement outside with mobile stalls, then inside with a fixed stall. In the 1970s, excavation for Line A of the underground led to its environmental and social degradation. In the 1983, 10,000 inhabitants of the city of Rome signed an appeal for its redevelopment. The decision to move the market to the nearby former Pepe Barracks allowed the garden to be redeveloped from scratch by the Gruppo Grau, a Roman group of urban architects. But it also marked a strong caesura in the history of the place, so much that it's still the focus of nostalgic narrative and memories of those interviewed. In the 1983, 10,000 inhabitants and even today, yes, the frequentation of the garden by a vast and heterogeneous public, given its proximity to the underground exit and the lack of maintenance, reintroduced the degradation. In 2011, a long process of popular participation and collaboration between the local administration and citizens began. Between 2018 and 2020, working groups with thematic tables are created to propose a participatory knowledge strategy for urban governance and sustainable social and cultural cohesion at the service of the citizen, institution, cultural and economic operators of the district, and thus contribute to its development. In particular, to propose a practice of urban regeneration integrated with a new social policies and cultural enhancement, valorizing the different proactive drives and the intangible and material cultural excellences present. Following the participatory progress promoted by the Participatory Piazza Vittorio Committee and the FAI Fondo Ambiente Italiano, financed the design of a garden management plan that is not only limited to its maintenance, but also take into consideration the social issue that gravitate around the garden, reasoning, for example, on cultural mediation action necessary to improve coexistence in this space. The garden common good must represent an example of interculturality of the different ethnic groups present in the area. On 13 November 2020, the garden will reopen thanks to the collaboration between Roma Capitale, the Infrastructure Department, the Environmental Protection Department, the Capitoline Superintendency, and the Esquiline Neighborhood Committees, which change made by the designer Valentina Coco, an architect from the municipality and Esquilino residents. The political dimension of the project is evident in the willingness of the actor involved to realize a garden as a community project, created through the dialogue to satisfy the need of urban dwellers in their healthy, recreational, aggregative, and cultural aspect. A multifunctional place in which different things can be done, and in which the different requests made by local stakeholders may have space. The garden is realized in the COVID era, so it's also motivated by ecological consideration, as it's seen as a green land of large square and the district. With COVID, the Piazza Vittorio Garden became an example of a project to be pursued for the well-being of citizens. With the garden redevelopment project, the cultural heritage of the garden is redeveloped. The Mario trophies, the Portal Chemica, this is the Mario trophies, for example, on the right side, and this is the Portal Chemica, which is part of an ancient marvelous villa, mysteric villa of the Marchese Palombara. After that, I will tell you if you are curious. This is the garden, actually. But also the path between Santa Maria Maggiore and San Giovanni Laterano, the proximity to the archaeological area and the underground area is musealized with the restoration of the Orti Lamiani and the creation of the museum. The historic garden is also restored from a botanical point of view with the conservation of the 280 plants of the original 19th century botanical plant and the planting of 42 new 70 palms, including the Californian palms, 150 decorative plants, 250 flowering shrubs from all over the world. Two new children's play areas, unequipped dog area, and play areas for table tennis, basketball, and football are created. I saw people playing cricket also, but it's another thing. And the redevelopment is also social and identitarian for the neighborhood inhabitants. A project carried out by the APS Association, Epiconchin and Concealing, and the local school, created the identity tree, a work of art for the garden to be placed in a degraded place. It is also a question to give prominence to the archaeological area and the neighborhood. Santa Maria Maggiore and San Giovanni Laterano are the destination of the Jubilee route, available to tourists. We are waiting the Jubilee here. That took place in 2025, and it's important to remember that Roma is the center of the Christianity, so every project done has this focus. The crossing of the garden is also confirmed by some tourists who report crossing it to avoid the arcades, considered dangerous, or to reach the square where the basilicas are located more quickly, a place to cross, to take a walk, and see the Colosseum from which we never tire. The garden is also like a resting place for tourists or young people who stop under the trees during their lunch break. Who perhaps as Marco, who works at Mondadori Library, says, buy a book and read it there in the corners. Patrizia, a shop assistant in the arcades shop, does not frequent it because she lives far away, but she walks through it every morning, not at night. Altauk is much safe now than it used to be once. You can see, because you can see from one side to the other of the garden. Before 9 o'clock, before work, the woman came to do Tai Chi gymnastics, the Chinese community. The men more rarely, they sit in the grass. The Chinese are close community. Then come the pensioner in the summer and the people walking the animals. The use of the garden and the space differ depending on the time of the day and the people who inhabit it. People greet each other and recognize each other. The elderly group, of which Rita is a member, met on the benches in the center of the square. They arrive toward the afternoon and sit near the bar. Afterward, they move to the exit toward the children's playground area. Rita says that the garden after the inauguration was a splendor. Now it's a dustbin. After 2 years, they've reduced it worse than before. In this garden, about 7-8 people, 2-3% are not European citizens. Out of 1,000 people, 999 are black. The Bangladeshi one sell food. They live in their habits. In the evening, the man and the woman arrive with the children, meeting in the garden every day. In the opposite corner of the garden, on the trophy side, yesterday there was a fight. Africans, Nigerian, but there are also South American, Peruvians. They stole the seedlings. Each seedling had a name tag. The children playground, that is one of the images. The children playground occupies a specific area of the garden and has an area with sand, a fountain, and the games. It's a place where the different community in the neighborhood, including Italians, came together. Bangladeshi women gather in the afternoon in their colorful dresses or traditional black dress, all wearing veils, even some girls. The men gather separately, but they are not far away. Many of the children go to the neighborhood school and speak Italian. The playground, meeting ground, it encourages it. But it's not culture, but people who meet and clash, as Marco Aime, anthropologist, writes. In the evening, women come to sell traditionally Bangladeshi food and drink, and the place fill up. The same happen on Saturday or Sunday. Throughout the shared practice of eating together, people conserve their intangible cultural heritage, revive it, and bring it back to life. On the other hand, the use of the garden as a living space for the community is perceived critically by many inhabitants who complain, among other things, about non-compliance detected hygiene and cleanliness of the common areas. For German tourists, I found many German tourists, sorry, that is for you. The playground is a corner of nature. They were looking for nature and they found it, a small society for their children to play in, a place where nature and culture are fused together. For Dorothy too, the garden is a space of nature and culture fused together. Children are transparent barriers, are adults say. The children play with each other, other regardless of barrier, neither language nor culture. Another defined area of the garden is the dog area, managed by the owners themselves, who sweep and keep the place clean. But many who have a dog do not frequent it because there is not a blade of grass and the water from the fountain causes mud. A social space. Franco says a new friendship are born there, doing things together, an opportunity to meet. We experience the garden as a square. There used to be old people there, now there are no anymore, he says. At basketball, they are all Chinese. Federica works in the cinema area, occupying a sector at the entrance of the garden. She says the garden is divided into districts, like the city of Rome. Of the garden, she knows the presence of the parrots, many in all of Rome, and the cats and the seagulls that wander around and live. Here are the people from the cinema, elderly residents of 70 and 80 age, but also young people, habituals. For Gianluca, in the garden, you see the everyday life of people. People who come, people habituals, children from the neighborhood. For him, the garden is more family than workplace. He calls it a home. In the stories of the elderly, the memory of the old garden is strong. 50 years ago, there was a cinema hall A and the cinema hall B. They cooked, there were tables and music, karaoke. In this sense, the cultural dimension of remembering, Clemente is the author, is not simply a cerebral mechanism, but a process of interpreting current reality in the light of the evocation of the past. Details about the old garden are charged with nostalgia, to be considered not so much as a generic melancholic mood toward the past, but as a cultural, reflective attitude whereby the recall to a supposed golden age serves as a means of interpreting the present. Is therefore assume a value, one may say political and strategic, in relation to the current reality, going behind its correlated biographical and individual meaning. In this sense, then, nostalgia is transformed into a community and even more identity factor. Traukit, people structure a short past to contrast with a present that is not accepted and recognized. For Rita, the garden had plants from all over the world, and each plant a path. They teach by the children, and the parents said nothing. Beatrice says that in 2 years they destroyed the garden. It was an oasis of paradise at the beginning. It was an immense beauty. No one sat on the grass. There was a prohibition to stop on the grass, and they removed the sign. Its definition also changed. This is the park of children. Its definition also changed as it often appeared as a garden, at the other times a square or a park. The spatial dimension of the garden is sometimes confused with that of the square, whose connotation it takes on. The square is divided in two, said Alessandra, woman who sells newspaper, historical memory of the neighborhood. On the other side, the one facing Via Merulana, so the chic area, there are more bars with table and people outside, aperitif, they are taking an aperitif. The other side toward Termini Station is the most disgraced part. All the Chinese, at the Chinese bar, they fight, there are criminals. The Chinese are a silent community. The Romanian make a mass, they drink too much, they smash bottles, they leave piles in the street. In the garden there are also people passing through. People who live here are not to be seen. Alessandra says it's like not being in Italy. About the Chinese, she said that they are owners and workers. No quarrels, but the Africans, the Peruvians, for her, the neighborhood should frequent the garden more, so as not to give space to those who sleep on the benches. The discourse on the perception of the otherness is one of the citizen favorite topics, whether they are residents or passing through. Also because everyone knows that the Esquilino is a multi-ethnic neighborhood. Among other things, the area was chosen by new residents, artists, filmmakers, and intellectuals, precisely because of its multiculturalism. The stories about the garden are always situated in a temporal space in which there was a before, a golden age for the garden, and now in which decay reigns. The rupture is always determined by the arrival of the immigrants. That is, rupture is fundamentally symbolic, without wishing to deny the objective situation of decay of the garden, has appeared from the interview. Many of the informants' statements, even if they may appear at first sight to be dictated by racist or xenophobic sentiments, in reality reveal feelings of unease, referring to the practices and the use of the garden by citizens of ethnic origin, especially North Africans. What is betrayed in the respect is the respect for the garden, the care of the place. A garden whose restoration was strongly desired by the inhabitants of the neighborhood, and which is now perceived as degraded. Claudio from the municipality of Rome Garden Service complained, saying that if the park has to go like this, one puts oneself at rest. That is a special Roman expression to say, well, we put the soul at rest, ci mettiamo l'anima in pace. That is the Italian way to say. In the afternoon, it feels like Ostia, the beach of Rome. Everyone is lying down. How do we cut the lawns? It's a dump. Even for safety, the bottles on the ground are broken, the lawns is dry because they leave cardboard boxes to sit on during the day. We're not there on Saturday and Sunday. It's abandoned. There must be 100,000 people a day. Beside an amplified numerical perception, what is evident in the sense of helplessness faced with the deterioration of the place, the here arrived in 2008 from Somalia. The here is a lovely interview, and it's in charge of cleaning public toilets. He says that when the police arrive, no one's come, only good people. But the garden is dangerous and they smash bottles. He says that if someone said something to people who behave badly, they say that the Italians are racist. The garden is very important to him, and he look after many plants. Those who were dead, some of them were dead, he bought them back with his salary. To be nice all the time. When a tree dies, they don't put another one. There's no care, nothing. I feel the same way as was a house. It's not my job, but the house. What emerged is a picture in which coexistence put into crisis by territorial practices that are not appropriate to the place. Deshant Tinar, a Bengali, has lived in Roma for 70 years. He complained that they have lost their habitat. The garden is dangerous. The Africans have been banging on the lawns, eating and throwing things on the ground. They have transformed the garden as it was before the restoration. It is frequented by people who do not live like us. The garden is in this case the place where the inhabitants share memory, heritage, and identity reside. It's perceived as an ensemble and unsafe. A sense of insecurity, not so much related to the illegal activities that there are there, or the actual danger of being involved in a fight, but the process involved in reading and recognizing the garden. The inhabitants no longer recognize themselves there, and the field is expropriated, rather than intolerance dictated by a generic fear of the other. The interview collect seems to refer to a competition on a territorial and symbolic level for the use of the garden. A garden charged with patrimonial and identity values for the inhabitants of the Esquiline, as is evident from the interview, in which the reflection of long-standing immigrants, now part of the social context of the neighborhood, are also included. Now I try to do some conclusion. Yes, I have a conclusion, which are more questions. Is a garden a space for gathering? In a way, yes, because it is in fact the people who make a garden. People make the garden according to the idea that their culture provides them. And from the garden, redesigned according to cultural standard, a series of values are projected into the place. The garden hosts multicultural festivals such as the Chinese New Year or the Ramadan. In the area, there is also the largest Chinese Buddhist temple in Europe and several mosques. In reality, however, the garden is a common space where various microcosms may or may not interact with each other. Bangladeshi people, the others, by watering cook at the bar, but they don't sit at the bar with the other guys. they group together and they stay together. They experience the garden is well-defined places. Even in the absence of seats, when the garden fills up with people, the lone space is occupied according to the group they belong to. The Africans, some of them, the Peruvian, and the Italians. Is the Piazza Vittorio a garden mirror of the multiculturalism? Yes. Many people from different communities live inhabits it at different times of the day. There are Chinese in the early morning, there are Bangladeshi and Indian community in the afternoon, Romanians and Peruvian in the evening at the weekend. None of those people actively take care of the garden. More than a place to contemplate the nature, the garden is experienced as a community place, a meeting place, a large square where immigrant communities meet, a garden of relationship for different users. Among other things, use of the garden highlights the nature's problem of degradation, its proximity to asylum center for immigrants and homeless, Caritas dining hall for indigents, and so that is inconceivable for inhabitants who feel themselves inhabitants who live in the first municipality of the city, but they feel second class. In the mirror of the contradiction of the contemporary world, of a less inclusive city, of a welfare state that no longer exists, but also the failure of a regeneration project that despite the good intention, has failed to really involve the different user of the garden in the care of the place. It is not enough to put in place so many beautiful projects such as folk dance workshop, summer cinema, music park. As Franco says, the problem is maintenance. There is a difference between doing a beautiful things and continue to maintain it. Is the Piazza Vittorio garden an intercultural garden? No. The intercultural project is still an utopia. And the Piazza Vittorio garden, with its micro walls, its sectoriality, and its conflicts over the use of the space, confirm this. This is my informant, thanks to them. That is the dog area. They were the memory of the place. They are said to be represented in this symposium. I ask permission. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Barbara. This is a very interesting point, the second presentation. This is the real life after the polis in a post-postmodernist society having to struggle with the loss of a genuine own culture, with different cultures coming in, with social instability. What do you think about this project? As Barbara said, it's a failure. Huh? How to achieve the synoikia between these different ethnic and cultural groups? How it is possible? What do you think? Are there more positive projects thinkable in the direction of a natural city, where also multi-ethnic, multicultural groups, as people from different cultures can really cooperate and live together? What do you think?
Actually, is it really a failure? I mean, it doesn't look that bad. But shouldn't we have in mind some kind of development of a place? Obviously, the present users were not part of the group who designed the garden, not part of the neighborhood group. So probably the process should continue and involve those users who are present now.
This is the point, lack of inclusion, of including the users and the inhabitants. But what do you think, Barbara? You are working on this. Is this a failure or not? Or is there some hope in the direction of a synoikia of different cultures?
Well, I am optimistic always, but the problem is not, the garden project is lovely. honestly. It's a marvelous project of the garden. They solve problems about darkness in the night. It's more safe, as you see. But it's not practical in the sense you can see a lot of places to sit, but all the people have said to me that there are no places to sit. So the problem is I can't sit there. I don't want to sit in the middle of the others. I need my space. So that is a problem that can be solved. It's not a problem about a gardening project. It's a problem to work with these people. So what I feel is it's not a good project because it's not place-based. They don't work with the people. They work with the community, but not with the people. And that is always the same. That's when I work with indigenous people and I do my project, a basic project, I work with the people all together. And if they don't want to put in resource something, we cannot put in resource something. I made a marvelous project to put in resource an heritage place, and after they organize a special assembly and they decide again, no, the community don't want to do that. The project was stopped. I work a lot, honestly, to do that. But that was what they want to do about his place. And they don't ask, they live, they are not citizens. So we are speaking about many citizen class B, no? So the second class. The Italians would feel to be, the immigrants and the guests. For tourists it's different because it's a passage place. So it's not a place to live. But a garden is usually a place to live.
But actually, if I had the choice to sit on such a stone bench or on the lawn, I would immediately choose the lawn. So for me, it's a bizarre idea to stop people from sitting on the lawn, no?
Yes. Yes, but the problem was, sorry, I answer very quickly. There is also a problem about the grass area. At the beginning, they closed the grass area because there were a lot of flowers. And the flowers now are totally destroyed because if the people sit over, it's easy to understand. So.
Yeah, but what is more important, the flowers or the possibility to sit on the lawn? It's a kind of, it's a question if you're interested in a museum garden. Or in a living space.
That is the question. That is a very important question.
That's a very good point. That's a very good point. What Barbara addressed also. It's a cultural conception, a culture-specific conception. Do we like to see an artificial nature as a beautiful garden, and then you don't have to sit on the lawn? No way. Huh? Or do we use the garden in our self-understanding plus the understanding of the garden? Or do we use the garden primarily as a community place, so where we can meet, where we can play chess before the Romanians and Peruvians are coming, of course, and then it gets tricky again in the evening. There are different concepts. What do you think?
Yeah, I would like to. Oh, sorry.
Massimo, please.
Scusa, no, io quello che voglio dire è che l'intervento di Barbara ci invita a considerare un grosso problema che abbiamo oggi per quanto riguarda il nostro tema.
So I just want to say that Barbara's discussion invites us to consider a problem that we have today.
Oggi è un periodo storico particolare.
We're in a very particular
Viviamo un
historical
periodo
period,
storico particolare, quello delle migrazioni.
that of immigration.
Quindi tutti i luoghi stanno mutando.
And so all places are changing
Perché accolgono nuove culture,
because they're welcoming new cultures,
nuove religioni.
new religions.
La città di 50 anni fa è scomparsa.
The city of 50 years ago has disappeared.
Quella che ne era un po' quella che si chiama uniculturalità, la cultura è scomparsa.
Monoculturalism has disappeared.
ma i luoghi mantengono una certa narratività.
But places retain a certain narrativity.
E questa narratività accoglie altre culture attraverso l'accoglienza di nuovi immigrati.
And this narrativity can welcome other cultures by welcoming new
I
immigrants.
quali creano anche delle loro piccole comunità
Who each create their own small communities
per mantenere la loro identità.
in order to maintain their own identities.
Questa si chiama multiculturalità.
That's multiculturalism.
Il problema è quello di far diventare la multiculturalità interculturalità.
How to get from multiculturalism to interculturalism.
Per ogni idea, per ogni ideale, per ogni progetto che riguarda la città dobbiamo tener conto di questo problema,
So for
se no creiamo fratture.
So we always have to keep that in mind with every project we plan, otherwise we only create fractions.
But what I don't understand is, or there's a kind of sub-notice as if the migrant people have less respect towards the garden than the Italian people. This is something I don't understand actually, because if you take Islamic cultures, they have the same idea of paradise and even much more respect towards garden as a living structure. Only they use it in a different way. So, and we shouldn't make the mistake that a different use is a sign of less respect.
I think it's very hard to have a sense of place when it's being used by people that don't have a sense of self. And I think the notion of respect for a particular place, it is a particular Western culture, and I think this notion of monoculturalism and then the plural culturalism, if people who come to this place feel marginalized, they have left a place there was no opportunity, and they have come to a place seeking opportunity, and they have not found it. And I think it's extremely challenging to ask people to take care of a particular place if they have not found jobs and opportunities to better themselves. You can't ask them to protect something and help to define it and help to redesign it if they don't have found a new home, in quotation marks, so that they can change a place, because it is not the place it was 50 years ago, and it will never be something wonderful again in a new way unless they have that chance.
Good point.
Well, I agree with you completely. If they don't feel they are owners of this place, they are not caretaker of it. So there needs to be a sense of belonging that they own, not necessarily physically or legally, but they inhabit the place. And they share it. And then if this is not organized perhaps by the Italians, and I don't necessarily know how this is done there, then it never will happen. Because they just use the garden, but they don't own it, so to say. They are not participant in maintaining.
Yeah. They have no feeling that it's their garden, it's just a place.
That's just a place.
I agree to Barbara Tagliolini that it is a very good example, a very interesting project, and it shows two things: that how people give a face to a place, in this time the garden, and how the garden offers certain possibilities to the people. So it's always coming from two sides, and I think in the last years it was more the people who gave a face to the garden, and now organizations should try to moderate it in a way that we have a place where there is more logical to have an multicultural space, and some maybe we can make that it belongs to them, that says, okay, this is the whatever Bangladesh area. Not just by naming it to just to show, okay, that is your space, but of course, where everybody can go there, maybe some food things or some typical things, maybe make it even a bit more Bangladesh, make it a little bit more African, and then the rest, where they can go do their African music or dancing. And in another place, there it is more like Italian, because they should also have some Italian part, because it is in Italy or in Rome, it should some Roman aspects in it.
Could be a good
So it's an interesting issue. Oh, sorry.
No.
I understand that the identity is crucial to these people, but at the same time, it should not be an exclusive that they separate themselves from the others. They moved into a community which is now, several ethnic groups. But the interaction about these is also crucial.
Yeah.
But you need moderation for this.
Correct.
And this is something that is hard to achieve. If the communities themselves don't try to moderate themselves to communicate, you can't really easily do it from the outside.
Right, somebody has to organize it.
Yeah.
Slowly, bits and pieces in the grassroots, so to say.
You know?
I wonder, I'm a bit skeptical about everything I heard. I wonder if the idea of the migrant people not taking care is kind of Eurocentric perspective. Yeah, if it's a different way of taking care, probably. I wonder if this has to be moderated. In Berlin, for example, there's a very famous park now where people from Southeast Asia came with food stores all by themselves, originally only for them, and now the other people and also the tourists come because it's the best Asian street food you can ever get. So it developed into a tourist attraction by itself without being moderated. So I'm skeptical about the idea of moderation. I'm skeptical about the idea of misuse. I'm skeptical about the idea of not taking care. I wonder if it's. I think the story behind again is the idea of a park as a museum. And
As a Western concept.
yeah, a Western concept. If I look at the flowers and I'm touched by the aesthetic of the flowers, and I don't step on the flowers.
Yeah, you are absolutely right,
Yes.
but there is something to take care of the garden, because garbage is there, everybody lives there, and I know it from the park which I use, nobody takes care of it, so somebody has to organize that, there is cleanliness and
Sometimes
so
it
on.
works by itself, and
Sure.
sometimes it doesn't.
Let me add something else. The garden has a fence, so obviously it's closed by night, right? In Germany, you wouldn't find any park with a fence. Nowhere.
While the Schlossgarten in Karlsruhe.
Yeah. That's Karlsruhe, no. No, but normally you wouldn't find a park with a fence.
No, but it's an interesting point, very interesting discussion, because this is polis concrete today, to take the bow to the first presentation. Here the dreams become reality or not. And here we have to look for solution in a non-monocultural world. What to do? You and then, yeah.
It's strange, but at the moment I think on a big park in Greenwich, London. It's an open park, it's also a little bit botanical park with flowers, and people are going there and they don't destroy the plants. And I think you said it needs a lot of communication to bring the flowers to the several countries. They are living there in their own groups, they are segregated. So perhaps some botanical excursione could be helpful.
This is moderation in the positive
Yes,
sense,
so-
to moderate it, to show it.
Yeah.
May I play the advocatus diaboli? And Sam said, okay, these people have no feeling for identity when they are coming already. Huh? And then they do not take care of the garden. This has been one argument, because on the Boton it's not our own garden. We have no feeling for belonging. This is a point. The other point is, I'm just playing advocatus diaboli. Yeah? The other point is, bloody hell, why they throw the litter in the garden, no matter if this is their own garden with belonging or not. Why they are destroying things. Why they are fighting to each other. This is no fighting ground. We are not in the Circus Maximus or in the former Bronx. What the hell is going on there? Why they are so respectless? We as Europeans have these nice gardens, the Western garden, and these guys are bloodily respectless. Why in the hell?
Maybe it's also an expression.
Provocative.
Maybe it's also an expression of not feeling integrated in the society. So to move up in the social ladder is also a thing where, I guess, once you have this opportunity, there will be a different treatment and also the feeling of partly being owning. But if you come and escape your living conditions, wherever, Bangladesh, wherever it is, and you come with a big hope to Europe, right? And I'm not so sure if then they await a Europe in their hopes and they are falling back in a reality which is much harsher.
Much harsher.
Right? So, so I do believe that once the social integration is more solved, there will be a different treating also thing. Maybe it's also an expression of alienation because they are not as integrated yet as they wish to be, I guess.
I'm still not willing to believe that they take less care. It's only a different way of use. Perhaps for certain migrants, the idea of having a dog in the park is something totally not understandable and something extremely dirty. So perhaps their vision on the Italians bringing dogs in the park is something totally impolite or inadequate. Are we really, why shouldn't people who need the garden more than others take less care? That makes no sense. They need it more because they don't have the big apartments, they don't have the inside gardens, they don't have the villas with the gardens. They are the main users, from what we heard, they are the main users of the park. Why shouldn't they take care? Makes no sense.
Nico?
I also think it's a symptom of frustration. People, maybe also refugees, are traveling or fleeing maybe sometimes 1, 2, 3 years from Africa to Europe, and then they arrive to Bray's country and they've got nothing. And I think places or parks like these needs more social workers, and because somebody talked about moderators for these parks, and I think social workers would be a good answer for this problem, because they don't tell them how to behave in the park, they show them in a more human way. And with social workers, these groups, maybe it would be able to connect them and make a melting pot of culture, and not to not start a clash of culture, like for example in the USA.
Okay.
I would completely agree. The issue is frustration and it's anger, and it's therefore that there's no sense of, we use the word ownership, but it's really more a sense of belonging. And I'd love to know more about the notion of food carts in Berlin, because I like the idea of being able to have your own culture, but at the same time it's a job, and that is when you start to feel that you belong, that you are economically self-sufficient. And I would love to know more about the people who are supplying rice, who are supplying beans, and helping each other as a economic supporter of the culture, and how that helps to define your own sense of identity.
I completely agree. Indeed. I guess this reminds me of that I'm coming from a culture in America wherein immigration is part of the everyday life. Not a simple thing even in America. We know it particularly today. But now I feel that Europe is, as a newcomer into this issue, and they learn how to, if they do learn it, how to deal with it. And it is not a simple thing, and it has to be resolved. It's on two sides because it makes two sides to tango, to organize these people to be a useful part. But when you are sort of rejecting this incomers in mental state, they are the outsiders, then this doesn't work. These people feel absolutely alienated, and it doesn't hurt the situation.
This is, I will play the advocatus diabolis all the time, with these extreme perspectives. I could say, to alienate and to build an in-group, we versus the others, no matter who is we, and no matter who are the others, this is a part of a general human condition. This is a natural move to separate. The point is to achieve a new intercultural synoikia. I'm not speaking of nature, I'm speaking of people. How to get there? When we have this innate tendency of disclosing ourselves as we versus the others. How to get it managed? And there have been proposals, we have to moderate it. Okay. There have been critical points of view. And the dirt remains at the dirt. How we can remove the sources of frustration causing the dirt in the final end. We have seen examples how it could work when it's combined with business. I get a belonging to a place when I can live from it and making my living from this place. If I sell some Chinese food, I can survive. And then I open my eyes to the belonging of this place, if I want to belong or not. If I'm coming from Nigeria with nothing, except my local contact, also Nigerian, already in the drug business in Rome, what the hell this nice park I should take care of? It might be nice, but I have survival problems. I just arrived in Rome. I'm going in a local community of Nigerian drug dealers. I know the situation. What the hell is this park? I don't care about it. These are two extreme poles of seeing the same beautiful issue. It's a garden. As Massimo had it, to throw the line, to take the line. A garden is a metaphor. Here we have the possibility in a new general changed framework condition of non-monocultural new cultures in the West. What we do now? It's a chance. How we tackle it. Do you have ideas? Moderation was one idea. Are there other ideas?
Guerilla gardening, some zones where people can plant by themselves.
Okay. And this will raise community spirit by doing things in common. Okay.
Yes,
Sean?
and the plants are stranded from the city, from the government.
Okay. Sean?
I think we were talking a lot about bringing different kinds of groups together and how could a place work where different mindsets come together. And maybe, because I think this is a very complicated issue, because I think humans have both. You want to be separate from other groups, but you also want to be part of certain kind of groups. And I think like imagining a place where all groups come together is quite utopian idea, I think. And maybe, maybe the garden itself as a separate place in the city may be an outdated idea. And especially as like in the first presentation, we were thinking about overcoming these separations. And so maybe the garden as a specific place in the city is just outdated.
very soon. But the existing garden is realistic. We have to plan our utopias if we want to succeed. The majority of our utopias of today have to take place inside an existing historic context, means inside an existing urban fabric. We cannot make it in the green meadow, except here, of course, in our venue, but this is the normal cases. We have to take some frame conditions. For instance, a park being demolished as in Rome, and now we refurbish it.
Well, the difficulty is not just multiculturalism, but multilinguistics. They don't speak the same language. So how they interact? I tend to think it is the doing. If they could be, say, employed, quote unquote, gardeners, who can come there and agree in that doing it jointly somehow. I'm doing this, and you are doing that. Somebody organizes that. That as an act itself could make them empowered to some extent, because if I am able to do something, and this is the benefit not just of myself, but for everybody else, then they can interact, even if they don't speak the same language.
Can I respond to?
I would add to this and strongly support what you said. And I think the problem might be that the garden is not used, or the garden is not needed. The users, they want a park. So you have to give up the idea of a garden if you want to follow the users. If you want to have the museum, then you stick to the garden. But the present users, the majority of the present users, they don't want a garden. They want a park. And so you have to make a decision if you want to follow the present users or the original idea that has been the idea of a garden.
You can combine both.
Difficult. The example with the flowers says that there is a problem in combining the two ideas. Either you sit on the grass and you destroy the flowers, or you keep the flowers and you don't sit on the grass.
No, so Massimo was going to say he wanted to respond to the original question, which was that this morning.
Sembra che qui bisogna intenderci molto sul giardino.
We have to really think about this idea of the garden.
Il giardino come questo di Piazza Vittorio, questi giardini sono diventati dei contenitori di
So
tensioni.
gardens like this one that Barbara was talking about in Rome have just become containers for tensions.
Mentre il giardino come metafora di un mondo migliore
Whereas the garden as a metaphor for a better world
deve essere uno spazio di relazioni.
it has to be a space for creating relations.
E quella possibile interculturalità.
And that possibility of an
Che la
intercultural
città
world,
futura, la città di cultura deve comunque cercare.
which the city of the future has to find, but maybe not in an actual garden like the one we just saw, where maybe like as you were.
Allora qui il giardino diventa la metafora data
So
e
only
non
as a
più
metaphor.
la patumiera. E la metafora è non più la patumiera e l'apsal. La patumiera, come si dice in inglese?
Trash,
Trash.
Dustbin, trash.
Abfall.
Abfall, dustbin.
There has to be a metaphor,
Junk,
not
trash, Please.
I can give a...
Wait.
Yeah.
Scusi.
Just a short question, because you always say it's not about the rubbish only, but actually the garden, or it is not everybody feels happy in there anymore because it took its ways as it took. And that is the point, and not about if you care or not care. And about the lawn and the flowers, or having parts where the garden aspect is more obvious than in other places where are more the people sitting down. That's how you construct the garden. There are so many examples. If you've ever, like, ich bin sehr schlecht in, also im Erdball oder irgendwas, oder irgendwie ein Wasserspiel. You can construct it in a way that is very hard to go there. So then they keep the people away. So even without fences, you can do that if you want, or with big stones and things like that. So that is a matter of construction things. And about putting them together, like you can maybe imagine a place that fulfills the needs of everybody. For instance, a water thing. When it is very hot, from all cultures they will go there in order to have some refreshment. Or whatever, it can be anything else, I don't know, a cafe or whatever, which attracts all kind of people.
Michael?
I can give a good example of sort of a grassroots movement where people came together and created something in common. Today they have 36 lots where you can sort of grow your own vegetables and also spend time outside. There are 17 different nationalities, but it took them 8 years to achieve this, because the city did not want to recognize them. Today it's a very prosperous area in the outskirts of that city, and I think there are some interaction, some knowledge transfer, there are language barriers and such, but they actually coexist at least in a very good way.
Which city is this?
Kristianstad, it's in the southern part of Sweden.
Okay.
It's the former Danish capital. It's a city with an interesting history of 150 years of war between the Danish and the Swedish. So the whole city is like a fortress. But they acted on their own. It was their own initiative and they were very persistent. And therefore they took ownership over this. So they feel that they actually like protected themselves. And for me, visiting this area, talking to people, I learned a lot about cultural differences, talking about zucchini and what it did with your body. And so it was so many very contradictory ideas what this vegetable do and why you should eat it. And of course that richness is fantastic.
This is the interesting general point in my eyes. It can work. And if we take Massimo's general statement, what has to be achieved in a positive sense for a city of the future, as a real realizable utopia. There's been a German term in German philosophy, konkrete Utopie. This means an utopia that can be realized. What he said is in your direction as a practical example. It can work if the people are able to develop a feeling of belonging and of cooperation. Then it will work. This is the good point about it. Please.
Maybe the people have the feeling that they belong here when we ask what they want to have in the garden. For example, when social workers came to the groups and asked them, okay, what would you like to have here? Is it like the water play, or is it more place to sit, or whatever? Then the people could think about what is the best for them, and maybe we can like arrange like a mixture of all their wishes, and then people would feel included. Yeah, because we don't talk
Very
about
true.
them.
The one who asks those questions will have to be facilitator to make the means available. I agree with you.
Yeah.
You know, if I am getting there a social worker or the authorities, what do you guys need here? Then I can contribute to that, to realize that there is a little water, drink water, or whatever. Of course, yes.
In one of our exhibitions, in your direction, in one of our exhibitions, we developed an utopia in the direction of this. So we have provided some means centrally, as the people need, and then different communities will evolve. But the communities are communicating with each other. It could be a good point, and this brings Also when we try to combine these two presentation themes, also of the basics, of the mindset, the basics, how to really reunite with nature, and of this practical case, plus the practical cases where it works, plus the advocatus diaboli objections, no, it won't work, this is unpractical, also what my part. No? If we take this all together, we can see that we can make a concrete utopia. It is not barely impossible. It could be makeable, and this is the good point, for me at least. No? Any other points? Lunch? Lunch is a good point. Lunch is a good point. All right.
Just incidentally.
Ja, so if you need it, incidentally, alles klar. That question.
Yeah, maybe.
Please.
The issue, I think, since you and I are the Americans here, America has been a land of unlimited resources for so long that we could absorb waves and waves of immigration, where Europe is really just kind of dealing with this issue because of unrest in Africa and in other countries as well. And now we are globally a land of much less resources now. And Europe especially does not have the land and consumption the way America once did. But in America, we're dealing with the political issues of building a wall and the notions of undesirables and undesirables coming from the south, etc. And I think Sweden and the Scandinavian countries, who have been so removed and are so much more not pluralistic the way the United States is, we have so many different cultures that absorb Somalians and people from other cultures that way, is an incredible challenge to do that. Yeah. So I think that notion of sense of self and sense of belonging are challenges that we face as a culture now, in general, Western cultures.
I think this is essential also for the concrete utopia. I want to take the connection to what Massimo said. No? The polis. The synoikia. If you take synoikia also cultural elements, this presupposes, on the one hand, it presupposes a sense of identity. I have to know who I am. Otherwise I cannot belong. And now I have to cooperate in synoikia with other cultures, with other identities, who also know who they are. Perhaps we can make, in terms of a common venture, practical solution like this, so what she said with guerrilla gardening in a more organized sense. We have it seen in England, for instance, in a park near Kensington or so. There were people from different nations cooperating in their free time, as in your case, Michael, cooperating in their free time, making a garden. Fantastic. With no quarrel, no beaten ups. Okay.
I think Europe will eventually has to come to terms with immigration because of the shrinking of the population of the natives. And then the economy is suffering, and if they don't come to terms with that, that's a disaster. So in some sense, these two parts, meaning the two parties, the immigrants and the locals have to come to terms. And then I will talk about it a little bit tomorrow in case of Japan, but that's one of those things, just the practical thing.
Yes.
Allora c'è un altro problema qui perché ho sentito parlare di identità.
So maybe we have another problem to talk about because I've heard the idea of identity being mentioned.
Già il filosofo Paul Ricoeur,
Paul Ricoeur, the philosopher.
aveva a suo tempo sottolineato la pericolosità del...
He already spoke about just the sort of danger of that term, identity.
Perché noi ci stiamo avviando verso diciamo, una nuova era dove speriamo di trovare l'interculturalità.
Because we're trying to go towards a new era of intercultural.
L'identità porta purtroppo all'esclusione dell'altro.
The idea of identity, unfortunately, brings along with it the exclusion of the other.
Attenzione, attenzione, c'è un'identità territoriale che è una cosa.
There's a territorial identity, that's one thing.
Ecco, come diceva Ricoeur, c'è l'identità narrativa.
As Ricoeur said,
Io ho parlato di narrazione da salvaguardare nel luogo. Ma c'è invece l'identità come rapporto delle persone. E Ricoeur credo che giustamente ha proposto il riconoscimento.
So Ricoeur, I think, rightly proposes the idea of recognition.
Il riconoscimento. Io riconosco il luogo in cui vivo.
I recognize and appreciate, of course, the place in which I live.
Ecco, dove gli abitanti riconoscono me
In which the inhabitants also recognize me.
e si riconoscono fra di loro.
And they recognize one another.
Cioè il riconoscimento supera l'identità,
So recognition
mantenendo
transcends
però
identity,
quella che è l'identità narrativa del territorio
but without
che
ignoring
si sviluppa
ignoring
in
narrative.
quello che è il processo di paesaggio, non più il progetto, ma il processo di paesaggio, il processo di una città.
This is a very important aspect. This relationship between place, luogo, relating to ethos, and to what we call in modern terms identity. It's a modern term. The feeling of belonging, and this relates to community and placemaking. For instance, one of our very aims at our foundation, Ideal Spaces Working Group, is the relation between place and community. Also, in a positive sense, how to create new places for new communities. Please.
I think Paul Ricoeur is a wonderful example in this regard. He has been, in many ways, a pioneer to bridge these diversities, past and future and all of those. But I'd like to add to that something that culture is not necessarily a solid stone. Culture is what we cultivate. So is identity. If we look at identity, I am a solid person and then I am already dead. If I don't refresh or renew who I am, then that's the moving point. Identity should be something which I cultivate, and my identity can come from all the sources, from all the other cultures, from which I can enrich myself.
Allora, per esempio, la nostra generazione, perché ora abbiamo un po' di anni,
Our generation
è cresciuta col mito della civiltà e cultura,
Our generation grew up with the idea of civilization and culture,
che è stato disastroso.
which has been disastrous.
Oggi stiamo imparando a parlare di culture al plurale
Today we're learning to talk about cultures
e
and
di multiculturalità
multiculturalism.
e di possibile interculturalità, che è quello che deve sostituire la cultura, tra virgolette.
But basically, this is the basic tenet of Paul Ricoeur. How to maintain an identity and at the same time getting involved with others. So,
basilare l'idea come ritenere l'identità, ma nello stesso momento partecipare nell'identità di altri.
Esatto.
so rather than either or, it's the both and.
Insieme, non l'uno o l'altro, ma l'insieme.
È quello, ripeto la frase di Hölderlin, l'uno in se stesso distinto.
The Oberlin's phrase, the thing distinct in itself,
La diversità.
diversity.
Yeah.